I might start with the analogy of blacksmithing and how it actually helps in a business, and I'll come back to how I even came to it, because how I came to it, it's like there's a bit of a story in itself. But you're 100% right. There's many micro trends and subcultures of people across the globe who are connecting with one another off a doing thing or a making thing. Yeah, I was privileged to be able to find it, but basically blacksmithing is heating metal up to a critical temperature. We're talking about 1,500 to 2,000 degrees Celsius. And at that stage, you can move and reshape it into something new. And it's interesting because when you take something through a process like that, you can't change it when it's cold. You need to change it when it's heated up, when it's really at that critical temperature. Otherwise, it breaks. And then on the flip side, when you create something new, it's fragile. It's like glass. And so when you do, let's say, you make a tool, or you make a knife is a tool, right? So there's an example of one, and it's like glass. So if you dropped it on the ground, it would shatter. And so you've got to take it through a second process, which is called tempering, which puts through different heat cycles so that you can make it flexible, strong, and long lasting. And the analogy of that is basically what I do with businesses. So that's why it was fantastic to be able to bring that love of something that I do with my hands in making and transforming into something that I do as my income and profession. And the analogy is just like they just hug each other. It's gorgeous.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP, or should I say good day, mates. I've got an Australian guest today named Russell Pearson, who is going to be taking us into his leadership journey. He is coming to us from the beautiful country of Australia, and I'm so excited to share his story with you. So, Russell, are you ready for kickoff?
I am. Let's get going.
Yes, let us get going. So, Russell is a business strategist team. He is a designer, a podcast host, a keynote speaker, and a blacksmith. Whether stalking the big stage, going global from his private studio, or rocking a comedy club, Russell brings passion, humor, and insight to every discussion. He has been the president of Professional Speakers Australia. He is the father of 3 feisty children. And he's super, super passionate about working with passionate yet frustrated business people to transform the way they grow their organizations. So, Russell, I know you have so much to share with us today. Could you tell us where in Australia are you talking to us from?
Coming in from Melbourne, Australia. That's not Melbourne, that's Melbourne.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's
Awesome.
fantastic over here. The weather's great.
Oh, I bet it's just phenomenal. It's we're recording this in February, so for us in the Northern Hemisphere, it's cold and snowy, at least where I live. And I know I've been down under during February, and I know how lovely it is. So I will imagine you enjoying that sunshine as we talk about your journey into leadership and the amazing work that you do today. So let's get into it. Tell us, Russell, your story about when you got the call to leadership. How old were you? Was it one of those lightning bolt moments, or was it more gradual? Take us to that time in your life.
Yeah, there's probably a number of different points, but I'll have to start at the beginning. I'm not going to start at the day I was born or anything crazy like that, but I am one of 5 boys, and not just one of 5 boys. I'm the oldest of 5 boys. And so, yeah, I guess I was called to leadership at the very start of things, because I remember when I was probably a teenager, we pulled out all these old Betamax videotapes, and they were the tapes from when we were young children. And I remember the first one was me on the grass as a baby. My mum's got like one of those old Betamax cameras with the microphone that's attached, and my father's like Annette, what day is it? Oh, it's Wednesday. There's something or other. And it's a fantastic day. And how cute is he? And look what he's doing. And then we move ahead to another video and there's my mum and there's the three of us and she looks a little bit rattled and we're running around and my dad's there with the camera again. He's like, Annette, what day is it? And she just sort of looks up like she's not really sure what day it is. And then we flash forward to there's four kids screaming in front of the camera. And then my mum walks in from the back with a baby in her arms. My dad's like, Annette, what day is it? And there's just and so being one of five boys, and it's Russell, Richard, Robert, Rhett, and Royce.
Oh, the R names. Wow.
That's right. They set themselves up for failure that way. But I guess I was called to leadership there because as being the oldest in that house, I was expected. There was an expectation of leadership in those early days. And it wasn't until I actually left home that I sort of got a break or felt like I did. But I think that was well and truly cemented from those early years.
Okay. And
it wasn't until I started my own business that the real call to leadership really happened.
Yeah, talk to us about that transition from being the oldest of five, and certainly lots of lessons in a home like that. But, making that transition where you knew, wow, the buck stops here with me. What was that like for you? And were there moments of any self-doubt? How did you overcome some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, there's so many lessons, and I will touch on especially one in particular in a moment. But I was working at home, and my first daughter had been born, and it was the first year. And I'd only started my business; it had been in that first year as well. Interesting time to start a business when you just have the first child.
Mm-hmm.
Money becomes more important than ever before. But she would start to knock on the door. And knock, 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 knock. And I think everybody who's experienced the last couple of years, if they've worked remotely, knows what that's like. And it just got to a point where I had to take this seriously. Then I moved out of there and I moved into a business incubator, which is a place where new businesses sort of work within one central office situation. And they'll talk together and share together. And, at the end of the day, they'll be standing in the corridors chatting about how things have been going. And one day, myself, and I'm sort of in sales and marketing, it's my main expertise, but myself, an accountant, it sounds like it's going to be a joke, but it's not, an HR representative.
Walked into an incubator.
Yeah, right. And an IT guy got together and we were talking. We all wanted to do professional development. We wanted to grow. And so we decided to just do this thing each month where we'd come together and one of us would share with the other some of their expertise so they actually would get better at their own business. And we did this a few months in a row, and then someone stuck their head in and said, oh, can I join? And then another person, and then another person, until we had 60 people every single month coming to this event, which we'd accidentally set up. And we started getting speakers in, and it was fantastic. And I was like, I don't know what I've created, but we're going to put some formality around it. And I guess because of the nature of being the oldest, I didn't step backwards when people said, well, someone needs to be the president. And I just didn't say no quickly enough. and so I became the president of this thing. And one day, one of the speakers didn't show. I'd never experienced that. Well, hang on. What are we supposed to do? We got 50 people there. They're all sitting in lined seats and they're ready to go. And so someone's going to have to speak. And so I said, all right, I'll do it. I'll share. And so I stood in front of these 60 people and shared my expertise the same way as I did with the four. And it was my first instance of really speaking publicly.
Wow.
And people came up at the end and they said, oh, that was fantastic. Do you speak professionally? I'm like, no, I'm deathly afraid of public speaking. This is not something I enjoyed. But it put something in me that said, if I do this, if I put myself out there, opportunity flows my way. And so I did it again. I put myself up for an award. I had to do a 10-minute presentation. It was in front of about 200 people. And I remember I was up there and I'm up on a big stage and I got what I call the Charlie Browns. I don't know if you've seen that cartoon of Charlie Brown, but when they're in the school and the classroom and the teacher at the front starts talking and she sounds like wah, 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 wah.
Yes.
Well, that's how I could hear my own voice. And I'm like, I'm about to faint.
Wow. Yeah.
I somehow got through the 10 minutes. I didn't fall down. My really good friends in the audience could tell that I was like, not as confident as what other people said that I was.
Sure.
But on the other side of that, 20 people asked to work with my business. Hey,
that's not bad.
Yeah. And I was like, well, hang on. All right. So I put 10 minutes of pain, I nearly faint. But it's okay. Nobody notices, which was a great lesson in itself because nobody knows your scripts. Nobody's in your own head. No one knows what's really going on.
Right.
And opportunity came on the other side. And so I guess, took that brave step and kept doing it and ended up like doing it and becoming the president of the Professional Speakers Association here in Australia, became a paid speaker and trainer. And it all came from like realizing that if I took the brave step, that there was an opportunity on the other side. And that's kind of where my leadership journey started, where if I put myself out there and put myself out there for other people, goodwill and choices came my way.
Yes. I think that's an amazing point that we can all write down and remember, that you got to put yourself out there. Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, we get the energy to do the thing by doing the thing, right? You can sit back and imagine it and plan it all you want, but until you're up on that stage, literally or figuratively, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And you won't know. You won't know it. And thank you for being candid about your nervousness, the fact that you had those Charlie Brown moments and but on the other side of it, you still got opportunity. See, that's the thing that people stop themselves before they even get going. And I imagine that in the work that you do today, you see that quite a bit. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about the work that you do, and specifically, as a leader in your industry, the sales and marketing industry, where do you see people stopping themselves?
Yeah. So the thing that I took as given, which I think was the head start, is that if realizing no one knows my script, right? So I'm going to be more critical of what happens when I'm up there. Any embarrassment is kind of mine. And the flip side of it is that if I continue to put myself out there, eventually I will succeed. Now, I don't know where that exactly came from, but that's certainly been a mantra. And that's been the case. You start, you fail, you find a way to practice, you continue to get better, and on you go. But the challenge with leading people into that is that they come with their own different experiences and backgrounds, and there are different mini traumas and much bigger traumas in their life that are actually blocking them from taking a step. And so in my education that I do, because I run a business program called The Forge, and we can talk about why it's called The Forge a little bit more in a minute. But
yes.
Yeah. But in that program, the business owners and it's really for specialist business owners, people who have expertise in either a service or a consulting space. But where they get the things that they need to build this amazing pipeline for their business, and those that just trust and do the work make it happen very fast. But those who don't, they don't do the tiny steps on the front end to actually fill up the back end. There's a colleague of mine, a friend who runs a speaker bureau here in Australia, and she does it over in the US as well, Leanne Christie. And she always talks about the idea of like building this sausage machine, which is like, you've built this machine, it's your business, it's a fantastic machine. But unless you put sausage meat in the top end of it, then nothing's going to spit out the end. So you come up and you put sausage meat in the top of the machine, and then it goes through the machine, and you run down to the other side of the machine, and you get ready to receive the sausages. And the sausages start coming out, and then suddenly they stop coming out. And you're like, why did they stop coming out? And then you look back up, you go, oh yeah, there's no more meat at the top of this machine. You run back up to the other side. And so there's this race between like putting stuff in and then receiving it on the other side. And I think that's the sort of nature of business in general. But what ends up happening is people, we're going with this sausage analogy, but people go, well, I'm not sure that the sausages are going to be any good. So I'm not going to put the meat in the machine because it could spit out and they could be bad. And if they're bad, it'll be a waste.
Oh, wow.
And so they never put anything in the front. And that's what ends up happening is that you've got people who are either moving into a new space where they've never actually created an invoice for someone before, or they've never gone to a corporate sale and understand the process of actually getting into a corporation. There is a process, and there's always a process with that. And because they don't know that last step, they have real trouble doing the first step.
Yeah,
and that in itself is a large part of how I need to lead those people, is understand where is the resistance and then help them dissolve it.
Yeah, just bust down those blocks, because again, I think it's interesting how we adults particularly, I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's pride, if it's ego, if it's just the nature of getting past adolescence and young adulthood, but it's like we think we're supposed to know everything before we've done it. And why would that be the case? I mean, for me, one of the biggest joys in life is I get to find out. Like, I don't know a lot. In fact, the more I learn, it's that old adage, the less I know, right? I'm like, wow, I thought I knew that. I don't know anything about X, Y, or Z. And, you talk about getting a corporate kind of a gig, invoicing. People love what they do, their specialty. And they're like, oh, I want to have a business. And then there's this whole thing called business. That's
right.
I had a conversation with a man not long ago, Paul Hazar, who runs a company called VetCore here in the States. And, he's opened up the model. They built a franchising model so other people can come and buy into the franchise. He says people who are attracted to business, or they're attracted to a kind of business because they like doing whatever that may be. And then they get in and they're like, we don't know how much do we charge? And when do we send an invoice? And what's the turnaround? That's the other thing. If you're billing insurance companies, for example, you're not going to see that money right away. It's not like a private person who I'm sure you've worked with individuals, and they'll just write you a check or they'll open up their credit card, right? When you're working with a big corporation, they got to go through layers and layers of people who sign off on this check, and then finally you get your money. So if you're like looking to make payroll or you've got rent to pay, you better, that sausage meat better be in there from another one, right? From another sausage.
And everyone's business is a little bit different. There's some people out saying that all businesses are the same, but they're not. And the process of engaging your particular type of client that you want to work with in your particular model and method, and even better, actually building a business that gives you a life that you want.
Yes.
They're different. And there's like 1,000 different ways to build this business that you've got here in front of you, but it comes down to, what do I want to do? Like, what does the life look like to actually build that sort of business? What sort of outcomes do I want? Who do I really want to help? Do I want to work with this person because they're going to be giving me this cash, or do I want to work with this person because it's going to be much easier and I'm going to love working with them? Can you have both? You can have both.
Mm-hmm. You can.
So so that's, that breaking down the blocks certainly for clients is a big one. And then the flip side of it, of running a business, is that you have a team and you have employees. And from my early days of being the oldest of 5 boys, I had a very different way of leading to the way that I needed to lead as an employer. And I think that in itself is a really interesting journey to understand that it's not about bullying people into things.
No.
You can't be the older brother who's like,
because I said so.
Yeah, exactly, because I said so. Yeah. And even my own brother understands that, who's in the military. He's just he's a retired major in the Australian military. That's crazy to hear of your little brother who's a retired major. Oh,
I bet it is. Sure.
Yeah. And but he's retired recently. He's now gone into civilian work, and even that's a big change. But these days it's not like the old days of the military. So it's how to help these people, yet at the same time help the business. So still having the business for profit, not just helping everybody.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
so you have your forging sales success. That's something that you spend quite a bit of time helping people with. Yep. What blacksmithing has taught me about sales and marketing. I'm so fascinated by the fact that you are a blacksmith, because I have noticed in the last few years a growing trend. It's a micro trend, but it's a growing trend of people who have discovered the arts and crafts of yesteryear, for lack of a better term. Like people want to work, we're so inundated with technology and people are in front of screens all day. And there's just this hunger to work with the hands, to create something physical that might be decorative. It might be something that you sell as a side hustle. It might be just something that's utilitarian, like bread making, and you're going to eat the bread for dinner. I mean, whatever. So tell us about your blacksmithing journey, Russell, and how you've worked that into you being a leader and helping businesses.
100%. So I might start with the analogy of blacksmithing and how it actually helps in a business, and I'll come back to how I even came to it, because the how I came to it, it's like there's a bit of a story in itself. But you're 100% right. There's many micro trends and subcultures of people across the globe who are connecting with one another off a doing thing or a making thing. And so I was privileged to be able to find it. But basically blacksmithing is heating metal up to a critical temperature. We're talking about 1,500 to 2,000 degrees Celsius. And at that stage, you can move and reshape it into something new. And it's interesting because when you take something through a process like that, you can't change it when it's cold. You need to change it when it's like heated up, when it's really at that critical temperature. Otherwise, it breaks. And then on the flip side, when you create something new, it's fragile. It's like glass. And so when you do, let's say, you make a tool, or you make a knife is a tool, right? So there's an example of one, and it's like glass. So if you dropped it on the ground, it would shatter. And so you've got to take it through a second process, which is called tempering, which puts through different heat cycles so that you can make it flexible, strong, and long-lasting. And the analogy of that is basically what I do with businesses. So that's why it was fantastic to be able to bring that love of something that I do with my hands in making and transforming into something that I do as my income and profession. And the analogy is just like they just hug each other.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so what I realized is that at a certain point in my life, I needed to bring in more energy into my business. I was giving out a lot of energy. I needed to bring in things that I love, and I didn't have a lot of these things that I love. Now, bear with me, because I'm just going to have to flash back to like when I was like 25 years old, because that's around about when I realized I wanted to start something. I'm 25 years old. I'm looking at my life and going, it's halfway over. It was hilarious. Like my 25th birthday. My 25th birthday. I'm like, I'm halfway to 50, and no one cared about my birthday anymore because I was an adult at this point. And like, I was like, I've done nothing. I don't know. There's probably a lot of people have had that experience.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm like, I have to do something. And so I search around, and I was getting into podcasts at that time, which is fantastic. So that was like 20 years ago. And
you were early then.
Yeah, I was on one of the early ones, and I was discovering these things like Brian Tracy talking about you can have anything you want, and like just listening to Jim Rohn, and like all the old speakers were actually getting into the podcasting side of things, and amazing audio books and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, I was getting into that, and so I was searching for like, what am I going to do with my life? I'd been working in design. I've been working in sort of the marketing area of design, but for someone else. And I just grabbed onto this thing called the Australian Dream, which is very similar to the American Dream, just minus the picket fence.
That's actually, I like that there's no picket fence.
Yeah, that's right. It's a little different here. There are kangaroos. No,
koalas.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I see way more kangaroos than I do koalas. I won't even play on the joke that any tourist comes into Australia, you've got to watch out for the drop bears. You've got to watch out for the drop bears. They come for you. Anyway, so within the next 2 years, I raced to trying to get to this success and change what I perceived as an unsuccessful life. And I had married my high school sweetheart.
Okay.
We had a baby on the way. I just started my business and I just bought my first home.
Wow.
And I'm like, boom, I'm on the way. Yeah, look at me go. And for the next 10 years, I just chased that same dream. And what's interesting about that dream is it's not my dream. It's someone else's dream. It's a stereotypical dream that's like not really attached to anything personal. So I didn't realize that for the first 10 years until I found myself, we did well. I did like a team of 12 people. We won some awards and some good things that happened. But I found myself lying in bed one night, staring at the ceiling. It's like 1 a.m. and I can't sleep. And down the hall, I can hear like a little girl screaming for her mum. And I'm like, that's not my daughter. And it wasn't. Like, it was this 90-year-old woman who was screaming and crying in pain and really confused. And then I like sort of snapped to it. I'm like, realized, oh yeah, that's right, because she's in hospital with me.
What?
And so I'm lying there in hospital, 1 a.m., staring at the ceiling and just sort of wondering how I got here. And not how I got into the hospital, because that was pretty straightforward. I'd come in 7 days earlier and they said, Mr. Pearson, you're fit and healthy, you're young, this shouldn't be a problem for you. Anyway, 7 days later, I come in and I'm in a critical condition. But I'm lying there and it's been 2 weeks. And I suddenly start to realize, because I'd stopped, and I didn't stop because I'd chosen to stop. I stopped because I was forced to stop.
Yeah.
But I'm lying there in bed and I've been thinking for 2 weeks and just realizing, wow, I've come all this way and I've done all these things and I'm not happy. And that was the catalyst that actually changed the way I looked at business. That was the way the catalyst that changed the way I look at life. And I'm like, what do I want out of life? What have I really got? And it started a whole process for the next 2 years that was quite painful. It's all change-based, and worked with some incredible mentors through that time, but realized that I could actually have what I wanted. I just needed to decide what that was, which was big, and is big in a leadership position to actually know what is the outcome, where do you want to go, rather than just take the given. And one of the other things that I realized is that I had family and I had business, but I didn't have anything else. I didn't have anything for myself. And so I started searching for something to do. And I realized it was not electrical engineering when I nearly blew up the house. Yeah. It's not, electrical engineering is not in my blood. But I found these YouTube videos about these people that had set up backyard forges and smiths. And I'm like, wow, these people are taking raw metal and they're turning it into things that are useful, and they're using them to actually make more things. And I'm like, I don't have a trade bone in my body. It's a limiting belief in itself, but I don't know how to do any of these things. So what I did, and you can actually go and see this if you ever want to, I decided to record a video, and the video was very raw and very rough. And it was like, I'm going to teach myself how to do this thing called blacksmith, and I'm going to record it every week. And I don't know how to weld. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try, and I'm going to do it in my own home. And I did. And I taught myself how to weld. I taught myself how to put my own forge together, and I built one. And then I went to a scrapyard and I found a solid block of steel, and I turned that into an anvil, and then I turned into one of the coolest anvils I've ever seen. I really love it. But I started making my own tools, my own tongs, just all these things that I created from nothing. And then it gave me something that I didn't have, which was this sense of fulfillment from making and creation that I wasn't getting from my intellectual work, because that was the nature of most of the work I was doing. I was using my brain every day. And now I got the opportunity to use my hands. And I think everybody, but especially men, because of the men I've spoken to, who are lacking what they perceive as substance in their life, to find a hobby, to explore and discover things. Because once I found this, they call it the third space, which is this place that's sort of yours. Once I found this, I realized that I'd been missing it. And when I now speak, especially older men in particular, you'll be at a networking function and they'll go, oh, what do you do? And I said, well, I do this, but to be fair, what I really love doing is this blacksmithing. And they're like, oh, you're kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, let me tell you about the cars that I'm putting together. And I'm like, well, there's this vintage motorcycle I'm building, or there's like, I do this carpentry thing. And there's all these hidden things which are theirs, their space. And they actually enable them to step away from the pressures of being a leader, because most of them are, and get lost in a meditative state, which is the making.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been so valuable for me. And it's been fun to be able to bring that into the rest of my life.
What you just shared, I don't think anybody has talked that in that way about how important the making is. I've never heard the term third space. Absolutely am grabbing that as a term, because that, I guess in the States we might call it the zone, but that's kind of different. You can get in the zone in the gym, you can get in the zone even in business, but that third space is truly your space for creation. And creativity we're all creative. I believe that. I was fortunate I grew up in a home with two incredibly creative parents who modeled creativity and DIYing. And there comes a limit, like your electrical engineering. There's times where you're like, I'm picking up the phone and calling the expert, right? Like we can't do all of it. But when you find the way you did that thing, and then it becomes so much a part of you. Oh man, I just got chills with you talking about that. And so here you are. Yes, you definitely need to share where we can see the videos, because I think I talk about leadership a lot on this show. Obviously, that's the foundation of why I'm here. But we're leaders in so many ways. That we're leaders in our work, our businesses, in our homes. If we're parents, and you're a dad, and so you have that leadership role. And each one, sure, there's some commonalities across the board, those universal qualities of leadership. But I think what you're getting at is that self-leadership, where you made a decision for yourself, for your own satisfaction, your own joy. And I hope, team, that you're really listening to this and thinking in your own life, if that third space does not exist for you, find it. Take the time to, again, gosh, the internet, YouTube is full of suggestions. Try this.
Good. So good.
So good. So that now has translated into when you're working. I'm just curious. What do people say about working with you through that metaphor? Because again, I'm a huge metaphor girl. I love symbolism. I love the significance of something bigger than ourselves through, again, like forging your path, right? There's the literal forging, but then there's the transformation that happens when, you said it, you made a decision to do something different. And that's the key. That's the key. You've got to make the decision. You can't, and then you burn the ships. You can't go back. No backpedaling. No, wait a minute. I'm abandoning. I'm going to go back to the flames. No, you're done. You're moving ahead.
Well, the third space is not my thing, but it's certainly a thing that's out there, and it's worth looking up. There's a little bit of literature about it. How do clients feel when they're knowing they're stepping into the forge? I think there's a sort of a nervous excitement, in that the metaphor itself creates this thing where they're stepping into a place where there will be a little bit of heat, there will be a little bit of pressure, there will be some transformation. And for some people, that it can scare them, but that's the whole process of leading them through the process. And so once it happens for them, once they realize things have changed, and it's part of the process is that I shine a light on where they've come from. Because I tell you what, there's so many people in life today who climb some incredible mountains, and there's a metaphor for you, right? So there's some incredible challenges, they overcome, they succeed, they do all these things, and they don't notice, because they're just looking at the thing that's in front of them that is bigger, and they haven't achieved that. And one of the things that I help my clients do is realize that you've just climbed this enormous, great step. Like, take the time to celebrate it. Take a moment to realize, because if you don't, then you're going to be chasing this sort of impossible goal of the next thing, and you won't realize that you're even on a journey. And it's really interesting, actually. There's some other research that's probably worth, if people are interested, looking up. And again, it's not mine, but it talks to why it feels like our life goes faster the older we get. And it's about these sort of micro automations. There are certain things that we do, brushing our teeth, walking, breathing, things that we do that are on autopilot. And as we go through life, more and more stuff becomes on autopilot. And when it's on autopilot, it doesn't go into our long-term memory. And so there's a perception of shrinkage of time. But in actual fact, it's only because all these elements of ourselves are on autopilot. And so one of the tricks that I learned probably only about 3 or 4 years ago was to take a moment to celebrate the tiny wins. And simply by doing that in a way that was different each time, like we're going to do a different experience, or we're going to celebrate it in this way, or I'm going to do a silly dance, or whatever it might be, it disconnects the autopilot. And it creates a perception of a stretching of time that you actually, a year feels like a year again. Instead of flashing past and going, what did I do this year? Nothing. And being all down on yourself. It actually creates these micro wins so that you can, and the cool thing about winning, as we talk about the sports analogy, winning breeds confidence. Winning breeds more winning. And the micro celebrations of, I'm setting a tiny task this week and I'm going to do the task, and then I'm going to celebrate the task, and actually celebrating it creates a trend of winning, which then creates a trend of confidence, which actually gives you this great perception of life.
Oh, gosh. So true. And that is such a great lead into the section of the show I call Touchdown. So work with me here, Russell. I mean, you're a smart guy. You know American football. Your team is down by 4 points. Okay. There are less than 30 seconds left on the clock, which means it's now or never. Tell us about a time when you helped lead your team into the end zone for that game-winning touchdown.
Game-winning touchdown.
Metaphorically, of course, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll just talk about something very recent. So I've got colleagues all around the world, and a lot of the work that I do now is around coaching. And I have friends that I speak to about things that they're looking to do. And one of those things was in the last recent years I saw one of my friends triple his pricing. And I'm like, wow, I wonder if I could do that one day. And it just got into my head that within a week, I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And my pricing wasn't as low as his, so I just doubled my pricing, but it was significant. And I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. I feel super uncomfortable with it. My team were like freaking out. I've got 4 people on my team now that were helping me with the task. And it was very much a case of, all right, how are we going to do this? And I'm like, I'm thinking like, I'm a creative person. I love being creative. So I'm going to have to create something and a different way of doing this. And I've got to do it my way. And then I'm like, hang on. The game plan's already there. My friend's already done it. Why don't I ask him how he did it?
Light bulb moment.
Yeah. And it's an ego moment too, because a lot of leaders think that they need to come up with the answer themselves.
Yes.
And they don't. And so I spoke to him. He goes, yeah, man, I'll give you everything. And he gave me his email sequences. He gave me exactly what he did, how he went about it. And I'm like, I'm so unconfident. But I'm like, you know what? This time I'm going to trust. And I'm going to follow his exact process. I'm going to do exactly what he did. I followed his game plan without changing it. And that's one thing that I think a lot of leaders will always try and do is add something of themselves. They'll try and change things. The game plan worked. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to implement this. And I put it in place. And we did things that we were very uncomfortable with. And normally we've been closing, and I'm going to be fairly open with this, something in the neighborhood of like 30,000 a month around that time of year. And this is coming into December. And we closed $148,000 in 2 weeks.
Wow.
By not straying from the game plan, from taking something that was proven, asking for permission, and then trusting in the process. And I think that's big because as leaders, a lot of leaders find it difficult to trust because they need to be coming up with the answer, but sometimes the answers are already there and we do not have to reinvent everything we create.
Such a great point. Oh my gosh. Because leaders typically, we're creative and we like there's something about, you said it, you want to put your own little spin on it. Can't take something exactly the way it is, but boy, there's so many object lessons out there of when companies, the game plan, the blueprint was there and people are like, yeah, just use it. It's great. And they're like, no, we're going to change it. And then it completely bombs.
That's right.
It completely bombs. Just do what works,
And that's the thing. And again, one of the pieces going back to the clientele and helping them get through that process is that they're scared to put the sausage meat in the sausage machine, right? So in this case, I was scared of doing it. But the biggest lesson here is leaders need to know when to be led.
Yes.
And I think that's the key there, is actually knowing in key moments, are you the right person to be making the call, or is there something there that's already a playbook, and can you be led in that situation?
Beautiful. Well, I know there'll be people who are curious about you, Russell, and the work that you do. So where do you hang out online? And I also know you have something special for Team PYP.
Yeah, absolutely. So Russell Pearson, that's SSL, the way Russell should be spelled, Pearson.
Yeah.
So russellpearson.com. You can find out more about me there and speaking and things that I do. But if you go to russellpearson.com/PYP4, I think that's the URL, and I'll just bring it up to make sure that I've got the right one.
PYP, the number 4?
PYP4. Sorry, no, not PYP4. What was the thing that you actually put on the
just PYP
on the email? PYP. I'll put it in the show notes if that's all right. I'll get it across to you, and you'll be able to actually see that thing. But what we've got there is, so it's a workbook that I created a couple of years ago that's been fairly successful for people, and it's about how to attract better clients fast.
Nice.
And so for those people who are struggling with, like, either they're not happy with the clients they've got, or they want to get more, or they are going into a new market or anything like that, that's going to be really, really useful for them to do that.
Oh, fantastic. So team, that link will be on Russell's show notes page at pyppodcast.com. And I sound like a broken record, but my guests are high quality people who want the best for others. They truly are here to serve. And any kind of resource that you can grab and work through is just one more thing that can help you achieve your goals. If what they're offering is in alignment with what you're looking at. We're at the beginning of a new year. It's 2022. Hopefully, we're going to be easing away from what the last 2 years have been for so many of us. And I don't think we'll ever go, that phrase, back to normal. What's normal anyway? I mean, we're creating as we go, right? But create the future that you want. Russell, you did really touch on that today. You brought up some great names, Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy, certainly Tony Robbins has been influenced by the OGs in the personal development space. And we just recently lost Bob Proctor, who was such a force in so many of today's personal development coaches and leaders. I know I worked with a coach for a year who worked directly with Bob Proctor, and his work influenced her and she influenced me. So we're all in this together. But you have to decide that you're not satisfied, that your life isn't where you want it to be. And maybe going back to what you said, Russell, about, are you chasing your own dream or are you chasing someone else's? That's a big question we all got to ask ourselves at some point.
And it's difficult to ask that question without a catalyst in your life.
Yeah,
so there'll be a point in time, my friend calls it the feather, brick or truck. There'll be a moment where you get a little tickle of a feather on the back of the ear. That's an opportunity to make the decision. If you don't make the decision, then a brick will hit you in the side of the head at some point. If you don't make that decision at that point, the truck is coming. The truck is coming along very, very soon. You can definitely get that ebook at russellpearson.com/PYP4. Definitely. I double checked that one. And if you do want to see that alter ego of me learning to blacksmith and actually making all sorts of mistakes, because if people ask me, what do you make? I said, well, a whole lot of mistakes is what I make. You'll find it at Rusty Pearson. So that's my alter ego, Rusty Pearson, on YouTube.
I love it. So Rusty Pearson I'll have a link to that too, guys, because again, we're not all business all the time. We can't constantly be in front of our laptops or on our phones. We've got to be out there making something that comes from nothing. That is the essence of creativity. And that's what feeds our souls. We need more soul feeding.
I love it. I love it so much.
It's been great. Well, listen, before we say goodbye, Russell, tell us who your team is down there in the amazing country of Australia. Who are you cheering for? Maybe give us a little insider peek at what that sport is like.
Yeah, so Australian rules football, so AFL, the Australian Football League, it's the Tigers. So Richmond Tigers is my team, and I'm very passionate about them. I think when I was born in 77, they had their last premiership, which is the equivalent of winning the Super Bowl.
Nice.
In, I think, 80. And so I was right at that age where I could make a choice, and I chose against my parents and against my grandparents and went with a team that was just winning at the time. We didn't win then for another 35 years.
Oh, wow.
But we have recently, and it's, I managed to get my partner into that team now. It's fantastic. But I think there's a lot of people around the world, especially in the US, actually finding out a bit more about AFL and really loving it. So
nice.
Definitely check that out.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, sports, I don't care where you are in the world. It's one of those things that can bring people together from all different backgrounds and create a shared experience that is really unlike any other. So that's wonderful. And you've been wonderful today, Russell. I've realized, I'm like, wow, we've been talking for this long already. It was just such a beautiful conversation. And thank you for really bringing it all today, giving us some inspiration and some tips also about how we can do better in our work, in our lives, and make this journey called life, which doesn't end at 50, I will tell you. Right
I know, yeah.
You're creeping up on that, my friend, and you got a lot left in you. So it's been great. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Mary Lou. I really appreciate you having me on.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes, but leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.